Welcome into another episode of Three's a Crowd. I'm Preston Vargas, writing solo for this one. Eli will be back on Friday. But before we get into this video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. We just achieved our goal of 100 subscribers over the weekend. And now the next goal for us would be to reach 200 subscribers by the start of football season. I think that's a good goal we can get to. So so please hit that subscribe button. So let's get into this one. We had March Madness all weekend, and we will get into that. But first, we have some NFL breaking news. And the Seattle Seahawks have signed Jackson Smith and Jigba to a 4-year extension worth $268 million. So he'll be the highest paid wide receiver. That'll bode well for the Seattle Seahawks franchise. Even though they lost Kenneth Walker to the Chiefs in free agency, I think that's a good thing. You're able to pay JSN $40 million. You got other guys, Ahkello Witherspoon. I think they picked up his option. We'll see what kind of contract he'll get with the Seattle Seahawks. All right, let's get into March Madness coverage over the weekend. It was a lot of it was great, some of it was not. So we were on the air for 48 hours over the weekend doing all the first round, second round coverage. There's some great games, but let's start with the first round, some notable results. We'll go back to all the way to Thursday. The Duke Blue Devils surviving a scare, trailing most of the game to Siena, the 16th seed out of the MAC conference, not the Mid-American Conference where the Ohio's, but the smaller MAC conference where Siena's in, quite frankly. So Duke nearly lose to them, so we'll see what happens to them. But uh, Duke ended up getting past TCU in the second round, but that was definitely a big scare for the Duke Blue Devils in the first round. Ended up getting past in the end, but still a scare there. And then some other results, some blowouts, but High Point defeating Wisconsin in the first round. That's Cinderella one. They almost went to the second round. We will get more into that a little bit later in the show. Uh, Louisville was up most of the game against USF, and USF nearly stormed back and won that game in the first round. But Duke ended up winning 83 to 87. And then 11 seed over a 6. There were two of those this year. It was VCU coming back from 19 points down to defeat North Carolina 82 to 80 in overtime. And then Texas defeating BYU. DeBonza had 35 points, but his effort was unable, not enough for Texas to go on to the next round. Then A&M defeating St. Mary's 63 to 50, really showing up when it mattered the most. And then in the very first game, TCU over Ohio State, that one came down to the wire. And then St. Louis just blowing out Georgia 102 to 77. So those were the results on Thursday. On Friday, not many notable results of note. Although this one stood out to me, Kansas only winning by 8 over Cal Baptist. It looked like it was going to be a blowout for Kansas. They were up by 20 midway through the second half, but Cal Baptist kept chipping away at the lead. Made it interesting, made a 6-point game at one point in the final 2 minutes, but Kansas prevailed in the end. And then Miami of Ohio, their run comes to an end after going undefeated to start the season. They lose 78 to 56 to over Tennessee. And that crazy buzzer beater to send it to overtime for Kentucky by Otega Owe, who had 35 points against Santa Clara, winning that game 89 to 84 in overtime. And of course, UCF falls short against UCLA 75-61. And then Villanova losing to Utah State. And then, of course, Iowa over Clemson. So those are results for the first round. Let's take a look at the second round. Let's take the notable results. A lot of blowouts for the top seeds going on to the Sweet 16. Uh, Big upset on Saturday was Texas defeating Gonzaga 74 to 68. The big win for for the Texas Longhorns as the 11th seed, a first four team, as a matter of fact, going on to the Sweet 16. The last time that happened, it was UNC. They made all the way to the national championship So great win for Texas there. And then Nebraska in a thriller over Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt nearly hit a beyond half court buzzer beater to win the game, but Nebraska will go to the Sweet 16 for the first time in their history. Nebraska winning two games of the tournament, and they won their first tournament game in the first time in their history back on Thursday. Then High Point kept it close for a little bit against Arkansas, but in the end could not outlast the Razorbacks. Darius Acuff put that team on his back. He had 36 points on Saturday against High Point. And then Sunday's matchups. Obviously, the big upset, the first one seed goes down. The Florida Gators lose to Iowa 73 to 72. And then Utah State made it interesting against Arizona, but again, Arizona just what hit the gas pedal at the end and ended up winning. Let's see, more notable results. Tennessee beat Virginia 79-72. That was the game that spoiled the perfect brackets. And then St. John's over Kansas over the buzzer beater for Dylan Darling, 67-65 win. And then Alabama just blowing out Texas Tech 90 to 65. So those were the results for the first weekend of NCAA tournament action. Let's take a look at the Sweet 16 preview right now because we'll have a show recapping Thursday's edition of the Sweet 16 on Friday. So let's go ahead and preview both days. So Thursday's action, the West and South have their regional semifinals. The first matchup, Texas and Purdue. So right now, Purdue coming in as a 7.5 point favorite over Texas. That should be a good one, but we'll get our game picks a little bit later. But I would say Purdue is definitely good, probably going to win that one. Iowa and Nebraska rivalry in the Big Ten. We did stream that game earlier this season when those two teams played each other in the regular season. So that should be a good one. And then Arkansas, Arizona, 9:45. The late game there on the in the West region, I think that's going to be a good one between Calipari and that Arizona team. I'm interested to see how Darius Safecuff is going to do against it. If he can go off, I think Arkansas can win that game if he puts his team on his back. And Illinois, Houston, I think that's going to be a sneaky good game there for both those teams. I think it'll be interesting to see how Kingston Flemings plays against Keaton Wagler, who's we'll see. I think that could be a shootout there in a good one late night. Friday night in the Sweet 16, the East and Midwest will have their regional semifinals. Rick Pitino and St. John's against that high-flying Duke Blue Devils team, the number one overall seed in the tournament. That's going to be a great game there in Washington, D.C. Of course, they played Michigan. Duke played Michigan and Washington, D.C. earlier, won that game. So we'll see what happens there. Michigan and Alabama in what feels like a Rose Bowl kind of between those two teams. I mean, LeBaron Feinlon Jr., that whole Alabama team can play well. I'm interested to see how they do against Jackson Lindenberg. They're a good coaching matchup in the late window. Michigan State, led by Tom Izzo, UConn, led by Dan Hurley. I'm interested to see how that matchup goes. Then Tennessee and Iowa State. I think that's going to be a really great matchup in the Sweet 16 in the late window. All right, so we previewed the Sweet 16. We previewed the we reviewed the tournament at large from a whole. Now let's check to see how my bracket's doing. So right now I got the first Sweet 16 correct in the East. Actually, both Sweet 16 is in the East. I got correct. And I got 3 out of 4 in the West region. Only one I didn't get was Gonzaga, who got upset by Texas, but I'm still alive there for the Elite Eight. And then this is where, or wait. Okay, so this is the first matchup I got completely wrong. So Iowa, Nebraska, I had Florida and Vanderbilt advancing. So that didn't go well, but I did have Illinois playing Houston. That was good. And I have Houston representing the South region in the Final Four. So that's So my bracket's not busted until the Final Four. Yeah, it's only busted until the Elite Eight. And then Michigan, Alabama. So I switched my pick at the last minute in the first round. I thought Hofstra was going to beat Alabama, but they played well without Aiden Holloway. So Alabama's moving on. And of course, I had Texas Tech beating Hofstra in the next round, which Alabama moved on. But I have Michigan winning over. But I have Michigan winning. That's the good news. Then Tennessee, Iowa State. I had Iowa State winning, but over Virginia. So that's the thing there. And all in all, it's pretty solid looking at the bracket group from the Three's a Crowd bracket challenge. Let's see. So right now, actually, let me see what the Sweet 16 gets you in points. So 40 points for a Sweet 16 win. So I'm basically a game back from the leader right now, who has 500, but it looks like he can't get that many points. OC had Houston winning over Virginia, who got eliminated. So I think we could take advantage with the leader not having Virginia in the NCAA tournament anymore. So he had him going to the Virginia going to the national championship. Big loss there. So opens the door for a lot of people. So we'll see what happens there. All right, let's move on to our next topic. MLB opening day coming up this week. So the opening day will be on Thursday for most teams, but the opening game is on Wednesday as the Yankees take on the Giants at 8 o'clock from Oracle Park in San Francisco. It's going to be Max Fried and Logan Webb. I think this is going to be a I think this is going to be a good matchup here. See how Max Fried does. Of course, no Garrett Cole. He's out until mid-season after undergoing Tommy John last season. Logan Webb starting on the mound for the Giants. We'll see how he does. We can't wait for baseball season. And then opening day, Thursday, NBC making their return to Major League Baseball. They'll have the first game, Pirates and Mets. Paul Skeens on the mound for the Pirates. We'll see how he does this season. Of course, made the Team USA baseball team in the WBC. Really played well there. The other game, Diamondbacks Dodgers on NBC at 8:30. Yamamoto on the mound to open up for the Dodgers. So we'll see what happens there. Let's see any other notable games. So it looks like the Rays play on Thursday against the Cardinals. They open up. They play the first three series on the road before playing the Cubs in their home opener. So we'll see how that goes. But it'll be interesting to see what Sunday Night Baseball looks like this season with it not being on ESPN anymore. Instead, it's going to be on NBC and Peacock. The first Sunday night game in that era will be on Peacock between the Cleveland Guardians and Seattle Mariners. It'll be interesting to see if the Seattle Mariners can go back to the postseason and actually win the American League this time. They were so close having the lead in Toronto in Game 7, but unfortunately couldn't close the deal there. But we'll see what happens with the Mariners. I think that with J-Rod, Cal Raleigh, we'll see if Cal Raleigh can catch fire like he did last year. And I think if he does, the Mariners will be good. And if Julio Rodriguez plays to an MVP level, I think the Seattle Mariners could be the team to beat in the American League. So right now, let's take a look at DraftKings for the title odds for baseball. So of course, the Dodgers are going to be favored. That's no surprise. But where they are is, let me scroll down here, at plus 230 to win the World Series at this point before opening day. So they say the Dodgers are the team to beat, but right, when they had Kyle Tucker, Shohei Ohtani, they keep winning the offseason. They've won their last two World Series. But if you have Dodgers fatigue like most of us do, for me, I want to see the Mariners in the World Series on the American League side over the Yankees. Even though the Yankees have won a World Series since '09, Mariners have never been to a World Series. And my World Series pick this season, as a fan, I would want to have Seattle. Let's pick them to win the American League this year. And for my National League winner, I think I'm gonna have to pick the New York Mets. So Mariners Mets World Series. I won't say who's gonna win the World Series now, but actually I will say I think I'd have to pick the because that would be an intriguing World Series, even though we don't have the Mets don't have Edwin Diaz anymore, and they lost Pete Alonso. I think the Mariners are gonna win. Looking at things, I think the Mariners would beat the Mets in the World Series. That's gonna be my World Series pick in the week before the Monday before opening day of 2026. So we'll play that back in like in 8 months' time, see if I'm correct. But we'll see. Should be an incredible baseball season. Then let's take a look at some NBA right now. Um, so Luca had a he avoided a suspension after getting his 16th technical foul, but it has been rescinded. He got a technical foul against the Magic on Saturday night, so he will be available to play against the Detroit Pistons tonight. So we'll see how that goes. And then Kevin Durant obviously passing Michael Jordan on the all-time scoring list for fourth all time. And Trae Young's injured again. He has no timetable for a return. What else is new there for the Wizards? But the NBA season's heating up right now. We're in the final. How many games has everyone played? I think 71. So in the final 10 games of the season, it's really starting to heat up. So the Magic right now, half a game back. They've lost their last four games after going on a good win streak there when they're winning 8 games. Of course, they've had a hard schedule. That's one of the reasons why. But losing to the Lakers, Hornets, Thunder, and Hawks, three teams that are in the playoffs or trying to get there. But tonight they play the Indiana Pacers. I think that's a win for them. Um, Detroit was the first team from the Eastern Conference to clinch a playoff spot at 51-19. So they've been doing pretty solid so far. They got 50 wins before their 20th loss. And see, last 10 games, they've won three straight games. They hit a bump in the road about a couple of weeks ago, and everyone's saying with Tatum, the the Boston Celtics are going to win the East. I still think the Celtics are going to win the East, but the Knicks have won six straight games so far. They're closing within half a game of that two seed, and that would be typical for the Magic. If we get the six seed and we have to play Boston as while they're the three seed, I would not like that. But taking a look at the Western Conference now, it's still pretty solid. The Lakers have won nine straight games. They're one of the hottest teams in the NBA right now. Second longest win streak behind the Thunder are now on an 11-game win streak. That's unbelievable for them. But the Lakers are separating themselves 10 games back and solidly into third. We thought they were in danger of falling into that play-in spot, but with Luca leading that team, I think he's had 40 points a game or 35 points a game, but I would say the Lakers look good now, but I think it's might be all for nothing. It depends on how they do in the playoffs, and they haven't really done well in the playoffs in their recent history. But looking at the standings now, Houston, Denver, and Minnesota all together in that 4 through 6 spot. It is with all of them 12 and a half games behind the leaders OKC, which the Thunder are going to win the or they're probably going to finish first in the Western Conference with the win streak they're on. They're not going to play San Antonio the rest of the season. But looking at the play-in right now, I think that's pretty much set. It's only a matter of time before the rest of the teams in that play-in are eliminated. It's an 8.5 game separation between the Warriors and the Pelicans for that, between 10 and 11. And same thing with the East. It's pretty much set in stone for the play-in there. don't really expect Milwaukee or Chicago to challenge for that spot. So let's take a look now. Uh, at the let's take a look at the plan for the West. As a matter of fact, I think right now that might be getting closer to being set in stone with Phoenix, LA Clippers, Portland, and Golden State. And the Portland Trailblazers, I think, could be a sneaky playoff team. We'll see about them, and that's a great start for them because they still don't have a head coach. They're Chauncey Billups, of course, arrested right before the season started. I think Tiago Splitter is the interim head coach. I think he's should be considered for the full-time job for Portland. I think he's done enough to show that. So the East, so the West, we did. Let's go to the East now. The Charlotte Hornets, one of the hot teams, but they're still in 10th. So their slow start to the season, what might cost them. I think they'll play in the playing game in the 10-9 matchup because they're, although 1.5 games back from the Magic for the eighth spot, I could probably see that. But we'll see. The Sixers went on a bit of a slide without Maxey and got themselves into the playing game after being solidly in the playoffs. The Hawks are one of the hotter teams in the NBA. I think they went on an 11-game win streak, but lost, but won again. They're 9-1 their last 10 games. Definitely got themselves out of that 9-10 hole and into the playoffs right now. It's going to be interesting down the stretch to see who gets to the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. That might be where the most intriguing spot is in terms of seeding wise. It'll be a mad race there in the last few games because let me see, the regular season ends April. I think it's on April 12th. The season ends, so the week after Easter. So we got 3 weeks left of season regular season action. So it'll be interesting to see what happens down the stretch. So there's our NBA coverage. And let's get a look at our other headlines. So in college basketball, Creighton coach Greg McDermott is retiring after the season. So after 16 years, he is officially retired. I think he's going to be replaced by the High Point coach last year, uh, Alan Huss, who signed with Creighton to be their assistant head coach and waiting to succeed McDermott after retirement. So it's a good thing Creighton got ahead of that before it became an issue. So we got a good succession plan there. The Pats have cut the Pastronaut Joshua Dobbs. Tommy DeVito will be the quarterback too. And the big news in the WNBA, they signed off on the players signed off on the CBA. So we thought there was going to be we thought there was going to be a lockout, but it's good that we're not going to miss games in the WNBA. And then the Braves announced that Spencer Strider is going to start the season on the injured list. So that's pretty significant there. They won't have their they won't have their ace in the lineup, so he's got a oblique strain. So we might be back in May. We don't know yet. So and Bill Self non-committal about his future at Kansas after losing. We'll see what comes of that. And then Hubert Davis, of course, after blowing that 19-point lead to VCU, they're talking about his future in Chapel Hill. We'll see what comes of that. And then after Wes Miller got fired as Cincinnati's head coach, he will go to Charlotte, signing a 5-year deal. So that's good for them. I think he's a good coach. He just outlasted his time in Cincinnati. So let's take a look at what we're watching for the rest of the week. Of course, other than Sweet 16 opening day action, the women's tournament has been exciting, starting with the round of 32. We got a buzzer beater yesterday in the Minnesota and uh, who do they play? Ole Miss, Minnesota Ole Miss game yesterday afternoon. Had that on the 4 box while streaming the men's tournament. But today we got some intriguing matchups. A former Big East matchup, Syracuse and UConn. Should be a good one. We'll see if UConn can avoid the upset there. The action starting at noon with Alabama and Louisville. And which which is the real USC Southern California against USC South Carolina. They play in prime time at 8 o'clock. The one seed Lauren Betts uh, in UCLA taking on Oklahoma State. It'll be interesting to see who will go to the Sweet 16 on the women's side, and that's what we're going to be watching for this week. So that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed all the March Madness coverage, and we'll be back for another stream. I think we'll do the opening game on Wednesday. Stay tuned for that. Anyways, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you again for the next one.